themselves on mute and ask questions only as and when they want to. I have certain questions already pre-prepared by students, and I'm going to share that. If you have any questions, please put it on the chat box so we can get to it, and ask the questions from there on behalf of you, right? To start off, just quickly, if you could all introduce your individual universities for 2 minutes so the students get a sense of where they're located, what they are about. Can I ask Ms. Maria to start, please?
Yeah, thanks, Sonam. I will begin with University of Alberta, which is one of the top 5 universities in Canada. It's what we call a large comprehensive research university, which means they practically offer everything at all levels. So from undergrad, master's, PhD, postdoc, research, everything. And then, of course, in terms of courses, again, from science, BA, BSc, BCom, of course, but then professional courses like medicine, dentistry, nursing, law, uh, kinesiology, everything, like everything, engineering, of course, all of these are there. It's in Edmonton, which is Western Canada, and located in Alberta. It's a 110-year-old university, which has built its reputation slowly and over time. It's one of the best universities in Canada for some engineering and computer science programs, and we see a lot of students choosing to go to Alberta just for the engineering and science options that they have. The other university that I am representing today is University of Guelph. This is on the other part of town, like the other part of Canada, which is the East Coast, 1 hour's drive from Toronto. It's a medium-sized university, which means there are about 20,000 students, and it's very well known for biological sciences. It has, in fact, the only Ontario Vet College, which is one of the oldest veterinary institutions in Canada. So very, very strong in biological sciences and research. But of course, again, it's a comprehensive university, so they offer BA, BSc, BCom, all other programs as well. And I'm looking forward to answering more specific questions later.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maria. Can I ask Ms. Rashi to tell us a little bit about UBC, please?
Hi, everyone. Firstly, I'm quite excited to be here with everyone in the virtual space. So who are we? Who is UBC? We are a large public research institution, and we're close to Alberta. We're located on the West Coast as well, in the beautiful province of British Columbia. A lesser known fact is UBC, in fact, has 2 campuses. So we have our Vancouver campus as well as our Okanagan campus. Although these campuses vary in size and location, what's important to remember is that both the campuses mirror each other in terms of the quality of education as well as the opportunities that a student has access to. We have about 65,000 students that currently call UBC home. There are several reasons why students choose UBC. For some, it is the world-class quality of academics that we offer. It's reflected in our consistent world rankings. We're in the top 25 public universities in the world. We currently have about 8 Nobel laureate winners associated with the university. For others, it is UBC's active learning approach that extends beyond the classroom. Being a top research university, we encourage our students to sort of remain curious, ask questions, think outside the box, try to find solutions through the research that they might choose to conduct during their time with us. But UBC learning also happens everywhere. We encourage our students to sort of venture out into the world. We have several community-based projects, cooperative education, as well as academic exchange programs that our students participate in, and sort of that helps them broaden their perspective, but also helps them gain valuable life skills. Some students also appreciate the academic flexibility that UBC offers. We currently have around 261 majors that we offer across 17 different faculties. So we have our larger, more popular faculties like the School of Engineering, the Faculty of Science, the Faculty of Arts, our Business School. But we also have some niche and boutique faculties such as the School of Kinesiology, Faculty of Land and Food Systems as well, for anyone that has alternative academic interests. Learning is also very interdisciplinary. Our students can do double majors, dual degrees, major minor combination as well. One aspect that I loved about UBC during my time there is how diverse the student body is, as well as how active the community is. So we're popularly recognized as North America's most international university. I love the fact that I could extend my social network to countries that I had never even heard of. Another aspect I love as a student is how active the campus life is. We have around 400 plus student-led clubs. I recently found out that we also have a Quidditch club for any of you sort of Harry Potter fans out there. We're also quite, we're an athletic university, so we have about 31 varsity teams. We've won about 65 Olympic medals till date. We also support our international students by giving out almost 30 million Canadian dollars annually in terms of scholarships. Obviously, there's a lot more that you can learn, but I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rashi. That was a lot of information, and I'm sure the students can find more on their websites. We will be attaching it on our WhatsApp, on the chat group as well. Ms. Shreya, can I request you to explain a little bit about Ryerson? And then we have a lot of questions that have come in the chat box, and I'm going to drive straight into them.
Hello, everyone. So Ryerson is on the other side of the country. We are located in downtown Toronto, and we like to call ourselves as an urban campus. The university is right in the heart of the city. Toronto is one of the most safest cities in North America. Coming to programs, we do offer all of the programs from your engineering, sciences, arts, design. We have introduced the Faculty of Law from this year. And students looking for example, doing aerospace engineering at the bachelor's level. We are one of the 3 universities that offer it at a bachelor's level. And we as a university imbibe a lot of experiential learning. So it is not just sitting in class and going through your textbooks. It is a lot of hands-on learning and experiences. Being in downtown Toronto, Toronto being the 2nd largest financial district and the 3rd largest tech capital of North America, in terms of co-op opportunities, it gives students a lot of lucrative opportunities in terms of growth and opportunities. So that's where I'll end it, and Sonam, you can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shreya, for that valuable. I have a quick question for Rashi, because I get this question all the time. If a student has been admitted to Okanagan campus, which many of them have been, and they are waitlisted UBC, will the waitlist then remove them because they've already accepted Okanagan? So do they still have a fair chance to be on the UBC from waitlist to move into regular? Number one. Number two, what is the probability that from Okanagan they can transfer to the UBC Vancouver campus at any time in their 2 years, after 2 years of study or 1 year of study?
Mm-hmm. So if a student has sort of gotten into Okanagan and goes ahead and accepts their offer, that does not impact their chances of getting off the wait list at Vancouver. When they accept Okanagan's offer, they can indicate that they would like to continue to remain on the wait list for Vancouver. However, given the competitive nature of our programs and we have limited spaces, it is a long shot to get off a wait list. In terms of transferring between campuses, a student can transfer across campus and between faculties after completing 1 whole year within their program/campus, but it is not guaranteed. It is a competitive process.
So just if you have any statistics available, what is the percentage of students who sort of transferred, say, in a business management course, which is probably the 90% most popular UBC course, that from Okanagan they've been able to transfer to Saunders, or even if not to Saunders, to even in the College of Arts and Science, they have a management program or a BCom program?
It's hard for me to give a statistic per se because it depends on the applicant pool each year. So I wouldn't be able to say that offhand, but all I can say that students transfer in and out of faculties all the time. For example, I myself, after my 2nd year, transferred out of science into one of the smaller faculties. So I know that it's possible, but it is competitive and depends on the applicant pool for that year.
Fair enough. It would also probably depend on spaces. Yes, Sonam, please go ahead.
Just quickly, if Miss Maria and then Miss Shreya can tell us, what is the current situation that the university is doing for the students in terms of, are they going to be allowed to do a semester at home, whether they'd be encouraged to go back to university? Can you give us, just throw a quick 1 minute, just window into this, please? Miss Maria, can I start with you, please? If you could just give me a window as to what Alberta and Guelph are doing, and in your knowledge, any other university as well. Miss Maria, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself, please?
So Naman, put on speaker view.
Yeah, okay. So I'll speak very briefly on the Canada picture, and then I'll go into specifically for Alberta and Guelph. So in Canada, about, I think last I checked, which was yesterday, approximately about 35 institutions have already announced that the fall semester will be a mixture of online and in person. What has, and this is where every individual university has defined what will be in person. But I think it is safe to assume that for most students who are going for undergrad this year, you will have a very strong online or video component, and you should be already mentally prepared for that. University of Alberta has actually sent a notice to all their students who've registered, who have registered for courses already, giving them a brief, and they are currently doing this whole week, and next week they're conducting webinars to explain exactly how the online and the offline component will work. University of Guelph has still not made an announcement, but I think it is fair to say that they will also be a combination of online and in person. That is from the university perspective. I think from the individual students' perspective, there is a very real logistical issue in terms of timing of getting the visas in time to reach September. So even if the institution is open for face-to-face classes on campus, I think most students in India will find it difficult to get their visas organized in time to reach. And again, I think it is safe to assume that there will be a 14-day quarantine, even like if they reach in September.
Wow, that was very insightful. Thank you so much, Miss Maria, for that information. Shreya, what is Ryerson doing? Is it also part of these 35 universities?
Yes, so we have announced as well that we will be doing classes online and partly online and partly in person, but the specifics of the same should be out in the upcoming weeks, and then we'll share it with all the applicant students. But apart from that, there's no other specific component in terms of the format of the classes or what is going to be expected of the students.
Brilliant, thank you. Rashi, I already know, has informed me multiple times of what her university is doing, but please, Rashi, if you can share with the crowd here as to what is UBC's policy on the matter.
Yeah, so our fall 2020 term is going to be online. So all the large classes are going to be online. A select few smaller classes will be in person. Our faculties have already reached out to all their admitted students, both incoming and returning, to provide more details. And they're sort of working very hard to ensure that come September, the high quality that's expected of UBC is maintained.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for all that, just to get this current situation out of the way. Now, moving on, some of the questions we are getting are from IB students and asking us as to what would be a good, now moving forward, when you are just looking at their grades coming into you. Also, this current 10 standard has been evaluated primarily, the IGCSE has been evaluated primarily just based on their previous marks. So we don't know how it's going to play out. But the students are asking, what kind of threshold of grades do you look at? And I'll start with Rashi first. When you're looking at students, especially in the business course or in engineering or anything of that sort, what kind of IB grading are you looking at, so that the students have a little bit of more awareness of what they need to do to expect to get into that university?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So moving forward, I anticipate that the admissions process and criteria will remain the same. It will continue to be competitive as well as comparative. From UBC's perspective, we will be flexible so that no student is disadvantaged because of COVID-related disruptions. But in terms of academic grades for our business programs, you're looking at a strong grade would be around 36, 37 on 42. For the engineering program, we're looking at about 38, 39 on 42. However, it's very important to note that UBC's evaluation process is more holistic. So for the business program, we do have a recorded personal interview. So we first look at the grades to see whether a student is academically prepared for UBC, but we also look at their overall profile.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Shreya, would you like to tell me a little bit about Ryerson?
So again, with Ryerson, when it's coming to the incoming batch for 2021, we are going to be looking at the overall profile in terms of, because Canada is more academic based and it's not so much more about your extracurriculars that you're going to be putting out there on your application. So the process in terms of what your admission requirements are will stay the same, but like you mentioned, like, you know, the students have been moved on to the next class based on their previous performance. So those considerations will be made, but it is not going to be a drastic change in terms of expectations, in terms of the admission requirements from the students.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms.
UFA is definitely more competitive, and I think an average of 32 to 35 for IB students would be expected.
Ma'am, this is out of 42 or 45?
45.
45, okay.
Yeah, and University of Guelph would be anywhere between 30 to 34.
Great. And if you're looking
and again,
at
it's just, sorry, just to interrupt, again, it's just academics. The extracurriculars come only if they are applying for scholarships. For admission, it's just pure curriculum.
Another quick question for CBSE board, is it still 85% and up that you consider?
For engineering, it's now 90% and up for Indian curriculum. And for all other courses, including business, it would be 80 and up. So one thing that I would like to clarify, UFA business is not a direct entry program. So you don't apply directly to BCom. You apply to a BA or a BSc and you transfer into BCom from the second year. Okay. So that's a bit unusual. But for Guelph, engineering would be 80-85%, and all other courses, including science, would be somewhere 75-80% range.
Okay, quickly another.
Let me ask a question which I'm asked very often about Canada, and I would throw it to all three panelists. A lot of the students drop maths after the 10th and 11th and 12th, and maths is considered mandatory for even a psychology or art course at many Canadian colleges, and Maria and I have been to and fro on this subject at almost every webinar we've done. So what is it that students can do now? Because they can't unwind the clock, they've taken the 11th, they've dropped maths. What can they do now to compensate for the maths? What diploma, what course can they do which will be accepted by all universities in Canada as equivalent to doing a maths high school program? So we'll go with Maria, then Rashi, and then Shreya.
Well, for students who have not taken maths, and I think Dr. Jain has brought out this lovely point, like not so nice if you're a student, but it's a very, very critical point that students who've taken up arts, even science and commerce without maths tend to find it difficult to get admission, especially into the top universities. So one of the options that we have identified and which we think is excellent is Ontario online curriculum, which is called ILC. And we are offering ILC courses in India. And it is, of course, all Ontario universities automatically accept ILC courses. But across Canada, every university, be it a UFA, be it even Guelph, all of the universities accept the maths that is available in ILC. The advantage is that this is a course which you can actually do. It's a Canadian course, and it is not like just preparing for a test, mugging for the test and going over there and acing the test somehow. But when you land up at the university and you have to use that knowledge of maths to get ahead in your program, struggling. So we do recommend for Canadian courses especially that students take up IELTS instead of taking up other options.
And I would probably add the students who are currently in COVID and at home should do the IELTS if they are considering Canada, not only for maths, but for any other subject. I have a science student who's going to McMaster who's been asked to do humanities as a mandatory subject. So he's doing sociology online. And the advantage is it's completely online and you can take exams as and when you're ready. So if you can do the 11th coursework and continue into the 12th, you can. You don't have to do a year of 11th, calendar year. So you can finish the 11th portion and in fact even complete the 12th and take both in the next 6 months. So that by the time applications open, you have, 2 years of maths to show them. So it doesn't go by calendar years, it goes by your preparation. That is the beauty of IELTS, which I have used for many students to make up the math. Sometimes psychology is missing, a humanities subject is missing, some prerequisite, whatever it may be. If they are missing because your school curriculum simply didn't allow it, or you had to drop it, then IELTS is a very good way to make up the prerequisites. And so that when applications open, you are not, there is no weakness in your academic application. Shreya, would you like to add to it?
Yes, I completely agree with Maria on that. I think we also recommend all our students because I think from India, I think the main thing is specifically students doing BCom and they have the option without math. So most of I think that's the pool of students I've seen the most who have actually registered for IELTS in the past years is not having taken math. So I think them taking that right now and saving themselves the stress during their pre-boards or application deadlines will kind of help them to be better prepared if they're taking that.
Rashi, would you like to add to that? Does Vancouver also accept the Ontario Diploma in Maths?
So from UBC's perspective, most of our faculties require math except for the Faculty of Arts. So you can apply to the BA program without having a high school level math. If a student is looking at a program that requires math, we recognize the AP pre-calculus exam if they have the final grade at the point of application. If a student is taking the IELTS exam, they can email me and I could tell them more details on whether it will sort of match the requirements for the faculty they're looking at.
I would also like to add, sometimes UBC Sauder is a little bit tougher, especially would Okanagan management take them with the IELTS maths? Because AP is a very fixed time in May and we won't have the result if we apply in September. Whereas IELTS, they can probably have the 11th marks and even the 12th if somebody is hardworking by the time we apply in October. My only concern with APs is that we have only one window and that is May. And if it's not happened this year. So then we don't have that score at the time of application.
So yeah, so if any student is taking the IELTS, they need to have their final grade, their final math grade available by our sort of documentation deadline. But yeah, it would depend on the program they're applying to and it would be case by case. So they can always email me and I'd sort of work with them in admissions to see how to go about it.
Yeah, that's
Since
most
we are
helpful.
already on the course of examination, the other examination that a lot of universities do require in Canada is the IELTS. And I know that that's not happening. And we did a panel yesterday, day before yesterday, with US universities, and they've now started recommending Duolingo as an alternative because it's an online thing. What is your take on, do you accept students who are taking an A level with an AS in English and just accepting that? Do you accept students who've taken HL English in IB and don't require then an IELTS from them? Can you each just throw some light on the current situation since IELTS is not, it's indefinitely postponed and we don't know when the next dates are coming out? What would be the situation for such students as looking at alternatives for this English examination?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to take that first. From UBC's perspective, there are about 9 ways for our students to meet the English language requirements for the university. If a student has done 4 years in an international curriculum, be it IB, American curriculum, or the A levels, if they have a strong grade, they are likely to meet our requirements. Otherwise, they could take the IELTS or TOEFL. All of this again is on our website, so they can check out the 9 ways in which they can meet the requirement. What I want to highlight is if a student has done ICSE or CBSE till grade 10 and then has continued that on with A levels or IB, they will not meet the requirement even if they're doing English HL or an A level English, because it's not 4 years.
Got it. Miss Maria, could you add to that, please?
So, University of Alberta and University of Guelph both accept the IB and the GCSE. Grade requirement is usually a B, so students do not require IELTS. And in the, like, there are of course other tests as well, too. Like, all the other tests are accepted by the university. However, both the universities recognize the Indian curriculum for English equivalencies. So if you have studied in a CBSE or an ISC school till grade 12, then and it has to be core English, it cannot be functional English, and you have scored above 75% in your final board exam, then we do not require you to take a test. We deem it as you having met with our English level proficiency. However, if you're from a state board, then we would require a standardized test score.
Thank you so much. Shreya, would you like to jump in?
Yeah. So for Ryerson, also for the IB and the CIE board and the IGCSE, the students can fill an English exemption form if they have studied for 4 years at a stretch in any of these curriculums, and they would be exempted. But students from CBSE and ISC would have to give either the IELTS or the TOEFL as per the required points that are required for it.
Okay, brilliant.
I'd like to add to what Maria said. Similar for UBC, if you are continually in a CBSE or ISC curriculum and the student has a 75% in their core English pre-board, they are likely to meet the requirement. However, I always tell students that given that pre-boards usually take place in January and our deadline is February, it's always best to take an English proficiency test in the case that you might not get that 75% and then not have enough time to meet our deadline.
Okay, brilliant.
So I just wanted to add, I'm sorry to interrupt, since your question was about what, since IELTS is not being held, I just wanted to add that in this situation, which is just as long as IELTS and TOEFLs are not being held, the university is accepting the Duolingo English test scores.
Okay.
And that is just for this time period. So students can take the Duolingo test in English at home and they can still qualify the English language requirement.
I think the Duolingo should be more for those who are entering 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
And therefore to meet the condition. Those who are planning to go 2021, I think that they have enough time to take care of the normal IELTS, which has become also CBT, that is computer-based test. So, and there is enough time to do it, I think, for the applicants 2021. It's only 2020 students who need to meet the condition who should look at the Duolingo.
Yeah. Okay. Another question which has come to us on this panel is, are there scholarships available for transfer students? How does transfer students work? Can a student studying here maybe for this current year and then take a transfer? Is that a possibility? And do they look for scholarships at that point? Or can they look for scholarships at that point? Rashi? Sorry. Miss Shreya, would you like to start?
So for Ryerson, students applying from India as transfer students are eligible for the international scholarships that are rolled out every year. Okay. And there's an application for that. So you go ahead and as for the application deadline, you fill the application for the scholarship, and if you fit in the criteria, then you shall be eligible for that. And apart from that, they can also look for faculty-based scholarships. depending on whichever faculty they're applying for, they can apply for those as well.
Great. Miss Maria?
So transfer is applicable in both the universities. It is definitely, you can study over here 1 or 2 years and then transfer to either university. Your course credits are evaluated. However, for professional programs, and engineering would qualify as a professional program, it is usually very difficult to get seamless transfer. So any student who is looking at engineering should think twice about assuming that they will be able to transfer easily.
Okay.
Second part is the scholarships. Scholarships are available for transfer students, and exactly as Shreya said, if you're eligible, you would be able to, like if you're qualified, you would be able to apply for it. However, I think it is fair to say that entrance scholarships, the number of entrance scholarships are much higher than there would be if you're transferring. So transfer students have a smaller pool of scholarship available to them than a student entering from grade 12 would.
Great. Thank you so much. Rashi, can you just add a little bit about this and we'll move on to the next question?
So we do accept applications from transfer students. However, it is extremely competitive because of the limited availability of spaces and programs. In case a student is admitted, they're likely to be automatically considered for our merit-based entrance awards.
Great. Okay, another question which has come from Ms. Purvi is, do any of the universities represented make a distinction between Math A and Math AI at a certain level for their courses in say business or anything of the sort? Do you make a distinction between AA or AI in math? Ms. Rashi, since you're already on.
Yes, so for most of our programs that require maths, that is engineering, science, business programs, you will need to take either math at AA, HL or SL. And if you're taking AI, it has to be at HL. We will not recognize it at SL if math is a requirement for the program.
But is there for business school a major difference between, say, they've taken maths HL, but between AA and AI, two students being the same grades, who would be preferred? I know it's a tricky question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question though. So from UBC's perspective, say for the business school, first we'd look at their overall, grades. Then we'd go on to looking at their grades in the courses that are most relevant to the program. So in the case of, math, we would look at business, economics, maybe even though business and economics is not a requirement. And then we also see if a student has challenged themselves. So if they've taken a course at HL, it will demonstrate to the university their ability to take a more rigorous sort of course load. So they'll be evaluated on all three sort of levels.
But maths, SL, AI is a no-no from most perspectives. What would you like to add? For UBC, I know maths, AI, SL is almost not accepted for any course. But does Alberta think the same? And then Shreya, I would like you to add to that.
So for Alberta, again, there is a distinction between how courses like engineering or hard sciences would consider it. But for business, again, like you pointed out, there isn't too much of a difference, and it would be accepted, but not so easily accepted for engineering or even a course like a computer science.
Yeah, and same for Ryerson as well. Is for the engineering and the business programs, it is a mandatory prerequisite. So they will not accept it at an SL. And apart from that, maybe for interior designing, we actually require math. So maybe for interior designing, if it was at an SL, then that would be fine. But none of the sciences and the business programs would not take it.
Can I please ask you, Ms. Maria, to tell us a little bit more about these co-op programs? I'll have a lot of students who are now considering like a hybrid. I think Canada was one of the first countries to ever introduce this, where the concept of learning itself, of education, involved a practical aspect to it. So the co-op programs which allow you to work and study, if you could throw a little bit of light on this, generally about Canada itself as a whole, since you have experience in that field, and then specific to your universities. Also, I have people inform me that a student who does get a co-op program then has an 80% chance of converting that to a full-time job. Now, is this a fact or a myth? And can you throw some light on something like this? So it just makes all the students a little bit more aware when they're looking at decisions.
So I'll just do a brief introduction on the co-op program, as you mentioned. So co-op is something which is pretty unique to Canada when it started, but of course now is available in many other countries and many other institutions. But co-op was a full-time paid work experience which was embedded in your degree program or your study program. The Canadian undergrad degree is for 4 years. And if you choose to take a co-op option, then your degree program increases by 1 or 1.5 years, depending on how that institution or course is running its co-op. So the biggest advantage that it gives you is that it allows you to have paid work experience. You actually are working in a company or in an organization like an employee. It's different from an internship. It's different from, like, off-campus work, which may or may not be at an organization. This is relevant to your field of study. Every institution has partnerships with companies, and they all have a co-op services section separately, which works with companies to help recruit students in particular areas. So you can have an arts co-op, you can have a science co-op, you can have an engineering co-op, you can have a business co-op. Most universities, including the two that I represent, very clearly specify which courses are available for co-op and which are not. So when you're applying, you have the option. In some cases, you have the option to select for co-op, and in other cases, co-op is something that the institution gives. It, like, if you're in the top grade in your faculty or in your subjects, then the top 25% are invited to take over, to go for co-op, because co-op is not easy to manage, because you have to manage both academics and work. And yes, it is paid work experience. And I see a lot of students get attracted by the money. But the purpose of the co-op is not the money, it is the work experience. I've had students take unpaid co-op because it was with a company which took them forward in what their goals were. So if you're doing engineering and you get an unpaid co-op opportunity with a Facebook or a Google, you would take it because it's a Facebook or a Google. Similarly, with a psychology or a business, there are some companies where the money is not important, it's the actual experience. So that is in a brief, what it is. And like I said, both University of Alberta and University of Guelph offer co-op. Your co-op degree structure, terms, everything is different from a normal 4-year undergrad. So you should check. Like sometimes you may have a summer co-op, sometimes you may have an academic term co-op. So you have to check your schedule and register for courses. Co-op can also be a bit disruptive because you'll be in and out of the university. And we have, like, UBC, she's an international student, so I'm sure she can speak from personal experience. So I'm going to stop right here and give it over to Rashi.
So I think, Maria, you beautifully sort of summarize the concept of co-op. As you mentioned, at UBC also each program has its own co-op department. Co-op is not mandatory. It's one of the very many opportunities that a student can pursue at UBC. So we currently have about 6,000 co-op placements across the world, so students can get placed anywhere. But there are other work opportunities. So we have a work-learn program at UBC where students can get meaningful experience by working on campus as well. We have community-based projects such as Engineers Without Borders that our engineering students participate in. So co-op is an option, but it's not the only option at UBC. In terms of the statistic, the 90% of students that do co-op end up getting a job within 1 month of graduation. My personal opinion on that is I did do co-op when I was a UBC student, and how it's helpful is it helps you make the connections. If you're likely to perform well, you're likely to be recruited full time. So it really helps you build your professional networks and then obviously get that hands-on experience that's important.
probably I would add that co-op also helps students to make up their mind. If they've done business, they all start with thinking, oh, I'll be the next investment banker and Warren Buffett. But when they actually start working, they realize, oh, numbers is not my thing. I think marketing, or I'm more a people's person. So it's also a reality check to help identify, say, within engineering, am I more artificial intelligence, or am I more robotics, or what is both ways? What am I interested in, or what are the professions demanded or skills demanded by the work world? So students then are more motivated, I feel, to do what it takes to get the dream job. So it works, I think, in a big way to identify what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, and also to add to that, so Ryerson actually has something called as zone learning, which is across, we have 10 different zones across each faculty. So students can actually, the idea is, it is helping students who want to be entrepreneurs in different fields, and they can go and work with existing businesses and local businesses that were started by alumni. So that gives them a sense of understanding about how these jobs work, and they can work there to start off. And then if that continues into a co-op, then that works out as well. So that is one option, like a dipstick kind of a model where they get a feel of what these co-ops look like. Apart from that, Ryerson has had a 95% placement ratio in terms of getting all our students placed uh, post their graduation and also during their co-op. So I think it is about students deciding if they want to or not, but the opportunities, I think, are available.
So since you've already started me on the next topic, in fact, is that what are some of the companies that come for recruitment in your area, and are they usually more local companies, and in which areas? So is it more like engineering or more to do with finance? What kind of companies, if you could name some of the companies within the area, because students like to go and choose to even do an internship or something within the locality, or like if there was a Dell or like a Google in that area. So if you can give me some names of some of the companies which are there, very nascent, very big recruiters from Ryerson.
And
So
I would probably I want to add this so that all panelists can answer. Are students limited to getting jobs only through campus placements? What all should they do? I mean, is it just, oh, 5 campus corporates are coming, therefore I'm limited to 5? How can they get jobs? What is the meaning of networking? And if you can just give advice and how to use their time, so that I just want mentally students to not get very complacent. Oh, I've joined a university, now it's the university's job to get me a job. What should they do? And can they apply across Canada? Can they move for jobs? Or are they very location driven?
To start off, like again with Toronto being the center, and the university being in downtown Toronto, the companies that we have that come in for recruiting is from your Google, Facebook, Ogilvy, Coca-Cola, PwC. You can have all the big names that are there, and also local companies that are Canadian specific. So there are those opportunities, and each faculty does help the students with those 5 applications to go in. But apart from that, there is nothing stopping the students to actually go across Canada and look for the jobs. And there are the international student services do have those facilities available on campus. And there are, like, for example, there will be like a resume building class, or there will be a networking events that will be happening and mixers through the year. It is about the students actually making that extra effort to go and see what else is there out there, to see what they can achieve, and not just stick to like staying in the box. So them making that effort.
Thank you. Rashi, would you like to add?
Yeah, so UBC's motto is a Latin phrase called tuum est, which means that it is up to you. As an institution, we need to provide you with all the opportunities that you expect out of a recognized university, but then it is up to you. You have to be tenacious, you have to be proactive. A lot of our students sort of have those innate qualities, which is why we look at the holistic sort of application. In terms of the kind of companies, we are sort of preparing our students to be global citizens. So we have companies such as Facebook, Google that come to recruit public agencies like the World Health Organization. So our students are placed everywhere. As I said, we have 6,000 co-op placements currently everywhere in the world.
Actually, I'll kind of just add on to that. I think co-op is not really limited. Yes, bulk of the co-ops are local, as in around the university towns, in the provinces that you would be. So Alberta being the oil province, obviously a lot of big oil companies come to recruit from University of Alberta. And Guelph being an agri and biological research institute, a lot of biotech companies, agribusiness companies come and recruit. Having said that, you will find that both the universities would have close to 500, 600, maybe 1,000 plus employers who register for the co-op services. And you will have everything from the MNCs that you are familiar with. So the Google, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, Intel, all of them, the financial services and the big companies again that you are very, very familiar with, names like Goldman Sachs, PwC, NY, all of them, to startups, which you wouldn't know. And then you would also have Canadian big companies. You see, like the way we have our Olas and we have our Big Baskets, which are huge companies and which are big recruiters locally. But not too many people outside of India would know what these companies are. So there are lots, like, there are Canadian banks, like apart from a Scotia Bank, which has a presence in India, there's TD, there's Bank of Montreal, there are Canadian companies which are big hirers. So you will find all these companies come and do the hiring. And whether it's a big one or a small one, I think it's just about getting the perfect match.
Thank you so much. I think that was very, very useful for all students. Quickly, if you can also shed some light on the post-study. So a lot of students after graduation actually want to do a master's as well within that same university, or if they've done it from Ryerson, they want to move to, like Vancouver, and they would like to go to UBC or in Alberta. So sort of shift places from one region to the other, maybe study further. So in terms of having after graduation, what would be, is it easy for them, or do they have to get work experience to get into a master's? And if not, then what would be the post-work period that they can stay back in the country? Miss Maria?
So I'll begin with that. So they are allowed to stay back 3 years after they finish their undergrad. So it's a 4-year degree, so they can stay on for another 3 years. That's under something called the postgraduate work permit. And here the term graduate means you finished your course, not that it's a postgraduate only after master's and not for undergrad. So you're allowed to work for 3 years. It is your decision whether you want to go directly for a master's after you've done your bachelor's, or you want to take a break, work, and then go for your master's. Typically, most programs, Indian students do tend to go for direct master's. However, if you're looking at an MBA requires work experience. And in that instance, it is always better to at least work for a minimum of 2 years. I would say 3 to 5 years is a better work experience, but a lot of students from India are not oriented towards that kind of a gap between the bachelor's and the master's. But minimum is 2 years, and you keep that in mind before you go ahead. And one point which a lot of people ask, a lot of students do tend to ask, co-op is not included as a part of the 3 years. So if you signed up for a co-op course, your 4 years plus 1 year is a part of your academics, and it is not linked in any way to the post-graduation work permit you get afterwards.
Okay, quickly now, the main question which we did was, how can a student during this time enhance their resume? I mean, that was the key thing. As to, I know grades are very important in Canada, it's paramount, but we are in lockdown. Students are not really getting out. They have three months of holidays coming up because, schools are shutting down. At least in Bombay, some of the schools are now going in for at least a break till August end. And the question which we as counselors are constantly getting, not only for students, from parents, what can we do to make sure that these kids are learning and are not, just gaming? So please, one by one, if you can tell us, or from your opinion point of view, what can students do to keep their skill level high, and what can they do to enhance their resumes? Yeah. Miss Maria, would you like to start? Then Miss Rashi and then Miss Shreya, please.
Okay, so well, to enhance your resume, the only thing that you can do is actually study, because your marks are your first and most important criteria. Having said that, I think these are very difficult times, and these are like, when you have the option to do other things, then choosing to spend 18 hours studying still involves going out. So while I would definitely focus on studies and whatever you can do online, we've talked about ILC, but there are other courses that you can also do. But definitely, whatever you can do online would add to your experience as well as your academics. And I would strongly recommend doing something attached to your studies to make that easy. Now, second is, what else do you do? Now, a lot of things that you do which count as your extracurriculars and involve you going outside. So this is a time where you have to look at yourself and figure out what is it that interests me apart from the studies. So if you're lucky, you were you were thinking of music or singing or something which does not require an external provider or external work. However, whatever it is, look for something that you're deeply interested in, because that is the only thing which is going to make a difference in your application. People who are in sports, people who are into quizzing, debating, there are online versions of at least the quizzes and the debates. We don't really have an online version of the sports, so you just have to wait for it. But the time that you're spending waiting to be up and about again, use it constructively. Look for something else that you would be interested in doing and you would be exploring, which would add to your CV when you're applying to an institution.
Thank you, ma'am. Rashi?
Yeah, so from UBC's perspective, we are obviously looking for students that are academically focused and motivated. So students should use the time to maybe ensure if they want to study, to continue studying. But we are more holistic. We really look for students that are tenacious, creative, and adaptive. And this is a great time to be able to sort of exhibit those skills to us as a university. We're not so concerned usually about the activity. For us, it's more about the learning that a student sort of gets from anything that they're doing. So if a student right now wants to use the extra time to do a Coursera course, sure, by all means. But maybe a student wants to help out in the community. Maybe they're trying to feed stray animals and they want to talk about that. That's okay. Whatever a student is passionate about, I think they should use this time to follow that, because it's less about the activity, but more about the ability to take away and reflect and learn from it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shreya?
So agreeing with both of them in terms of, whatever they have already mentioned. But apart from that, what we're doing at Ryerson is we've started two initiatives. One is called Get Ryerson Ready. So we have, starting from June, we are going to have like a month-long calendar through all the summer months for students who either want to understand what is required, like say for math, or want to take some writing classes. All of that is there's going to be a whole calendar in terms of activities that these students can avail of. And it is going to be free. The other, our Faculty of Communication and Design is specifically started online classes for, like say, photography and diary writing and all of that. So it's basically for students to go and avail of these. And it doesn't necessarily, like Rashi said, you have to do something for the profile to be considered for while you're applying, but it could just be something that actually interests them and, is keeping them a little bit more company along with their books and online classes. And it's just helping them build their profile for them.
Thank you. Dr. Jain?
This stage, probably this would be just the right time to introduce something that I have initiated called virtual internships, because I'm getting this question daily from students, counselors, parents: how do we keep them busy in a productive way? So we have started something called virtual internship, which will be relevant for those wanting business or media, want to explore. It will include under a mentor, a business mentor or a CEO of any company, or a mentor who can walk the students through on what are the skills required for their company and give them a project to do. And then we have faculty, senior faculty, who will actually teach them the theory to write a research report. So it's a mix of theory. So you learn what is primary research. How do I gather? How do I create a survey monkey questionnaire? How do I collect resources? How do I collate them? How do I write a research report? So they'll begin with the mentor, work under him, and then finally present to that company and get an internship certification. So it's a new concept. Invention is needed to deal with these times. So we call it virtual internshala. And we are launching it next week with the faculty who will train the theory and with mentors who will train in the practical aspects.
Fabulous.
So do you think that's a good initiative? I mean,
yeah,
will definitely add to the profile. Like there is nothing for students to lose in this. I think and it'll be great because it's just it'll be a good learning experience. Like something as basic as making a survey, because a lot of it's that basic, but it's something that is important. So that's great.
Thank you all for joining us, Sonam.
Yeah, just closing statements, please. Can you give us one piece of advice you give students, and just something to let them know or consider before they all sign out?
And then we'll also ask, I want to introduce you to our team, Bijal Shah, Purvi, and Manvi from Delhi. Manvi, do you want to come in on the screen and say something about your organization in Delhi? She's what we call a quiet worker, works very hard and accesses a lot of Punjab and Delhi. And we are really reaching out to places which are hungry. Sometimes I feel Bombay is oversaturated with knowledge and information, and it's the places we can't reach, we can't travel, that Manvi is reaching. Manvi, a few words from you.
Yeah, hello everyone. So we have an office in North Delhi here, and I have actually a question for all of you, because a lot of my students or master's students who are looking for master's program have actually messaged me personally to ask you this, that how is what after BCom and after BBA students can do. I think that we left out, are they able to apply for master's immediately because it's a 3-year degree, and otherwise what can they do in India before applying for a master's program, and do internships count, or they should take a full-time work experience before applying to a master's program? So what would your quick take on this be?
I think that's a brilliant question. So I begin with Shreya, move to Rashi and Maria, because I'm sure you have a lot more to say about more universities. Shreya, to you.
So specifically at Ryerson, I look at undergraduate applications. So we do, I would not be able to answer Manvi's question a lot in detail, but having said that, there is 16 years of education that is required. So when they're applying for their master's programs, depending on either they would have to either do like a diploma program or do an additional year here or in Canada to make up for it. And if you're going to say business school, you will need the work experience. That can be done here as well, and then you apply. But that would be like my 2 cents on the postgraduate applications that I would like to.
Yeah, Rashi, would you like to add?
Similar to Shreya, I only handle the undergraduate questions from India. It's always best to connect with graduate studies at UBC directly for any master's related questions.
Yeah, Maria ma'am.
So while I do, my team does handle only undergrad, however, I can speak for the masters as well. Since your question was particularly about business, I think it depends upon what the student wants to do. The business students have an option to go into an MBA, or they can also go into a plain master's, some institutions often an MCom or a master's in finance. So if they're just going for a plain master's, then their 3-year can be considered by the institution, and that works university to universities, and they can apply directly and they can go directly for that particular master's. However, if they are going for an MBA, And I mentioned this a bit earlier as well. If they're going for an MBA, they should definitely look at work experience before they go. Most institutions in Canada accept the 3-year undergrad degree, and when they're applying, they should look at whether the institution that they're applying to says Canadian bachelor's degree or equivalent in their admission criteria. The or equivalent usually translates into the equivalent Indian degree, so they would be applicable. And if they have the work experience at the GMAT, then they are again admissible for the MBA.
But I would like to add, to be on the safe side, if they are getting work experience, I would suggest they do an MCOM, even if it's distance learning, from a recognized Indian university. The key words are recognized Indian university and not diplomas from autonomous private institutes. And they can combine it with full-time work and take a GMAT and then apply for an MBA across the board. Then you don't have ifs and buts on your application. Yeah, anything that Bijal or Purvi would like to ask?
Yeah, actually, if possible, I'd like to ask a question. Hello to everybody, first of all. But the question that we get asked very often by undergraduate applicants, usually because they're stranded for time, is are there certain co-curriculars or extracurriculars that are preferred by universities over others? Because the general perception is Canada is very academically oriented. So if I were to do a research paper or a personal project revolving around research, or if I were to do an internship, it would increase my chances of admission versus doing an extracurricular like continuing to playing an instrument or being part of student government at my school. So is that really true that there are certain co-curriculars or extracurriculars that weigh more heavily in an admission decision than others? And if yes, then what do you recommend the students do?
So for both the University of Alberta and the University of Guelph, the co-curriculars are only considered for the scholarship application. For admission, it's just marks. So, and the really, really nice thing about Canada is that there is no pecking order of this activity is better than that activity, you know, so you can do whatever you are doing. It can be sports. So there is no such thing as sports is looked at or frowned at, but if you're a quizzer or a debater, then you are super intelligent and that would be considered a bit more important. So you could be doing anything. You could be a diver, you could be like, you know, a quizzer, you could be just somebody who likes to ideate. It's about how you explain what your extracurricular activity is to you and why it is important to you and why you think it mattered enough for you to do so much of it.
Brilliant. Rashi, would you like to add?
Yeah, so we're one of the few Canadian universities that really look at the personal profile, and our evaluation is holistic. Not to say that academics is not important, that's first the primary criteria. But when we're looking holistically, we're not so concerned about the activity, as I said. There's no cookie cutter right or wrong activity. It's more about the student's ability to take up something, because we offer a very active learning approach. So if students have done that and demonstrated that through high school, they're more likely to fit in and thrive, because at the end of the day, every university wants a student to succeed. So that's where we're coming from. So it's not that we prefer a sports captain over a cello player. That's not how it works.
Okay, Shreya is the same for Ryerson?
Yes, I don't think that changes, I think, across the year.
Okay. Any further questions coming in? Okay, I'd just like to
bring Bijal on for a second just to introduce her. I'm sure some of you have met her. Bijal, can you come on? Speaker share view.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. That was a very insightful session, and a lot of questions have been answered. And as Purvi last asked, this is a question which constantly the students do ask about profile building. So I think we have to tell them that academics is the most important thing, and that is what they really have to focus on. All the other things are going to be a secondary addition, as from what we understand about the
Canada.
So is the core, I mean, in this entire COVID thing, and one more question that students are asking is that if there is going to be deferment, if students are not going to apply this year, is it going to become more competitive in 2021?
Yeah, because so if students are applying for a deferral, there is no guarantee that they are going to get a seat for 2021. So you can do the application because then there will be a new cohort that is applying. So your application will get reassessed.
Yes.
So they need to be mindful of that. They can definitely apply for it, but they will have to be ready for maybe not
getting in.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to my distinguished panel and Dr. Jain and all the colleagues who've joined in from Delhi and Ludhiana and Bombay and everywhere. Thank you so much for taking time out on this afternoon and being part of our panel. I really appreciate this this time that everyone's done, and we've all experienced this new way of now communicating. So thank you so much. And this is Sonam Mundra from EduAbroad Consulting and the partners of many schools signing off. Thank you so much, everybody. And we hope to see you soon.